The moment Olivia Harper stepped into the grand ballroom, she felt both out of place and electrified. The chandeliers sparkled like stars above her, casting a golden glow on elegantly dressed guests who moved with practiced grace. She adjusted the strap of her modest dress, silently promising herself she wouldn't trip, spill, or say something awkward, though the universe seemed determined to test her. Alexander Drake stood across the room, the very definition of poise and power. His tailored suit, flawless posture, and cold, calculating gaze made him seem untouchable. Rumor had it he was ruthless in business and merciless with anyone who disappointed him. Olivia had heard the whispers. She didn't care. She had her own life to live, and tonight she would simply attend the gala, network a little, and leave with her dignity intact. Fate, however, had other plans. As Olivia reached for a glass of sparkling water, her elbow nudged a nearby tray, sending a crystal of red wine tumbling directly onto Alexander's pristine white shirt. Time slowed. She froze, mortified, and all eyes turned toward the scene. I'm so sorry," Olivia stammered, grabbing napkins in a panic. Alexander looked down at the spreading stain, then back at her. His sharp eyes softened just a fraction, though his lips remained a firm line. For a moment, the cold billionaire and the nervous young woman shared a suspended silence, broken only by the faint clinking of glasses. Then, unexpectedly, Alexander spoke, his voice low and steady. "It's just a shirt. But are you always this clumsy?" Olivia's cheeks flamed, but there was a spark in his tone, something she couldn't place. A flicker of curiosity ignited between them, small yet undeniable, hinting that this encounter might be the beginning of something neither expected. The next morning, Olivia tried to put the gala incident behind her, but every time she sipped her coffee, her mind wandered back to Alexander Drake's eyes, cold yet curious, sharp yet strangely attentive. She shook her head and laughed at herself. He was a billionaire, untouchable in every way, and yet, for some inexplicable reason, she couldn't stop thinking about him. As fate would have it, destiny wasn't finished teasing her. Later that afternoon, while browsing a small, cozy bookstore tucked between glass towers downtown, she noticed him, Alexander, standing in the philosophy aisle, scanning titles with the same intensity he wielded in boardrooms. Heart racing, Olivia ducked behind a shelf at first, then, summoning courage, stepped forward. "I didn't expect to see anyone from the gala here," she said softly, her voice just above a whisper. Alexander looked up, and for a moment, his expression softened in surprise. "I like quiet places," he said, closing the book in his hand. "Somewhere to think, without the constant noise." They wandered the aisles together, talking about books, dreams, and life's little ironies. Alexander's smile, though brief, was real, an unfamiliar warmth that made Olivia feel lighter than she had in months. At the register, a sudden downpour began outside, trapping them in the tiny store. Laughing at the coincidence, Alexander offered his coat, and without a word, Olivia leaned into him as they shared a long, comforting hug. No words were needed. In that simple embrace, trust quietly took root, and the memory of the gala mishap felt like a distant shadow. As they parted, Alexander's eyes held hers longer than necessary. "We'll meet again," he said, a promise that sounded more like hope than threat. Olivia walked home with her umbrella forgotten, a strange but thrilling certainty blooming in her chest. Some encounters were not accidents, they were beginnings. Days turned into weeks, yet Olivia couldn't shake the memory of the bookstore encounter. Every time she passed her favorite coffee shop, she half expected Alexander to appear, leaning casually against the counter, scanning the morning crowd with those piercing eyes. And almost predictably one morning, there he was. His presence as commanding as ever, yet somehow approachable in a way that made her pulse quicken. "Good morning," he said, offering a small, genuine smile. The corners of his lips barely lifted, but it was enough to send a flutter through her chest. They shared coffee at a corner table, talking about everything and nothing. Alexander's questions were careful, almost probing, as though he was piecing together the parts of a puzzle he didn't yet understand. Olivia found herself revealing small details: her love for old books, her weekend volunteer work, the way she always paused to admire street musicians, but keeping the parts that could complicate her life carefully tucked away. Yet Alexander had his own mysteries. He spoke of business triumphs with casual precision, but when asked about his family or childhood, his gaze would drift toward the window, distant and guarded. Olivia sensed the walls he had built, brick by brick, around his heart, and she felt a quiet determination to understand him, not break him. When the rain began again, light and insistent, Alexander did something uncharacteristic. He reached across the table and gently squeezed her hand. The touch was brief but electrifying, an unspoken acknowledgement that trust and closeness were slowly growing between them. As Olivia walked home, she realized the spark was more than curiosity now, it was the start of something that could not be ignored. And Alexander, somewhere in the city, felt it too, the rare, disarming pull of someone who could reach the heart behind the armor. The annual charity gala was back, more lavish than ever, with glittering lights reflecting off polished marble and soft music weaving through the crowd. Olivia adjusted her dress nervously, trying to ignore the knot of excitement in her chest. She hadn't expected to see Alexander here, yet somehow, as if guided by fate, he appeared, moving through the room with his usual composed elegance. Their eyes met across the crowd, and for the first time Alexander smiled, a real, unguarded smile that made Olivia's heart leap. He approached her with an easy confidence, offering a hand that felt simultaneously commanding and gentle. "May I?" he asked, his voice low, almost conspiratorial. Olivia nodded, letting herself be led onto the dance floor. The music swirled around them, but in that moment, the world seemed to shrink to just the two of them. Alexander's hand rested lightly on her back, and she could feel the warmth of his presence radiating through her. Their steps were awkward at first, but slowly they found a rhythm, unspoken understanding growing with every turn and sway. As the song drew to a close, they paused, faces inches apart. Alexander hesitated, then pulled her into a tender, lingering hug. Olivia felt the careful barrier around his heart soften, just enough to let her warmth in. For a fleeting moment, the ruthless billionaire seemed human, vulnerable even, and Olivia's chest tightened with the knowledge that she was seeing a side of him no one else ever would. When they pulled apart, Alexander's eyes held hers, a mixture of curiosity and something deeper she couldn't yet name. "You're different," he murmured, a hint of wonder in his voice. Olivia smiled softly, her own heart echoing the sentiment. Some connections didn't need words, they were felt, in the warmth of a hand, the press of a hug, the spark that lingered long after. It was a quiet Sunday afternoon when Olivia found herself on Alexander's office balcony, the city sprawling beneath them in a mosaic of glass and steel. He had invited her to see a project he was passionate about, but the grandeur of the building wasn't what held her attention, it was the man beside her, a side of him rarely glimpsed. Alexander leaned on the railing, silent for a long moment before finally speaking. "People see me as unapproachable," he admitted, his voice softer than she had ever heard. "Ruthless, calculating. But few understand the why behind it." Olivia watched him carefully, sensing the weight in his words. "I think we all have walls," she said gently. "The trick is finding someone worth letting inside." He looked at her then, his usual composure faltering for the briefest instant. Slowly he began to share childhood struggles, the pressure of expectations, the loneliness that accompanied success. Olivia listened, her own hand brushing against his, offering silent support. When it was her turn, she revealed pieces of her past, not the deepest secrets, but enough to show vulnerability. A family she sometimes disappointed, dreams she feared would never be realized, and the quiet fear of never truly being seen. Alexander's response was subtle but profound. He reached out, placing a hand over hers, a firm yet reassuring gesture that said more than words ever could. They lingered like that, letting the comfort of touch speak for them. As Olivia left later that evening, she realized something remarkable: Alexander's walls weren't impenetrable. They were slowly crumbling, piece by piece, and she had a part in it. And somewhere deep inside, she knew this connection was rare, fragile, and perhaps, just perhaps, the start of forever. Olivia had hoped her past would remain a quiet shadow, something Alexander would never need to confront. But the truth has a way of surfacing at the most inopportune moments. One late evening, Alexander discovered an old document linking Olivia's family to a past business dispute that had indirectly affected his company. The connection was unintentional, but in his mind, betrayal flashed like lightning. When he called her to the office, his usual icy calm had returned, sharper than ever. "Olivia," he said, voice steady but clipped, "why didn't you tell me?" Olivia's heart sank. She hadn't lied, she had merely hoped the past wouldn't interfere with the present. "Alexander, it wasn't my fault," she began, voice trembling slightly. "I never intended to hide anything. I just didn't think it mattered, not to us." His eyes, once warm and curious, hardened. For a moment she barely recognized him. The man who had been softening before her was gone, replaced by the formidable billionaire she had first met at the gala. "It matters," he replied quietly. "To me it does." Silence stretched between them. Olivia's chest tightened as she searched for the right words, but only tears came first. She stepped closer, desperate to bridge the distance, and Alexander, after a long pause, allowed her to hug him. The embrace was tentative, heavy with tension and emotion, a wordless negotiation of trust and forgiveness. When they finally pulled apart, Alexander's face was unreadable. Olivia felt the weight of the rift, yet somewhere beneath the hurt, she sensed a flicker of hope. She had no doubt their connection was strong, but she also understood that this was a turning point. How they moved forward would define everything: love, trust, and the promise of a forever that now seemed fragile. The days that followed were heavy with unspoken words. Alexander threw himself into work, his office lights burning late into the night, while Olivia avoided the places they once met so effortlessly. The warmth they had shared, the laughs, the subtle touches, the quiet hugs, seemed like memories from another life. Olivia wandered through the city, the autumn air crisp against her cheeks, and every familiar corner reminded her of him. The bookstore where they first talked, the small cafe where their hands had brushed, even the quiet park bench by the fountain, everything whispered his presence. She missed him fiercely, but she understood the weight of what had happened. Trust, once cracked, wasn't easily mended. Alexander, behind the polished glass of his high-rise office, stared out over the city with a clenched jaw. He replayed every smile, every touch, every word Olivia had shared, and realized how empty the triumphs of business felt without her presence. Her honesty, her warmth, her gentle insistence on seeing the real him. He had taken it for granted, and now the silence between them was unbearable. Neither reached out for a few days, each lost in their own thoughts, but longing grew like a quiet tide, impossible to ignore. Finally, Olivia left a note at his office. Simple, heartfelt, no explanations, just a reminder that she still cared and believed in them. Alexander found it late that evening, reading her words over and over. In that note, a bridge formed. A spark of hope flickered, fragile but persistent. They had distance now, but also a chance to reflect, to appreciate what they meant to each other. And in that reflection, both realized something undeniable. The bond they shared wasn't fleeting, it was worth fighting for, no matter how much fear or pride tried to hold them apart. Alexander's office was quiet, the hum of the city below a distant murmur. Yet his thoughts were far from silent. Every moment without Olivia felt like an ache he couldn't ignore. Pride had kept him away, but it had also shown him the depth of what he had nearly lost. Tonight, he decided, he would no longer let fear or misunderstanding dictate their story. Olivia was at the community center, organizing a local fundraiser for children's education, her energy radiant despite the tension that had clouded her days. When Alexander walked through the doors, the room seemed to pause. Conversations faltered, eyes turned, and Olivia froze, heart pounding as their gazes locked. He crossed the space with calm certainty, closing the distance that had stretched between them for days. "Olivia," he said, voice low but resolute, "I was wrong to let anger and pride come between us. I should have trusted you, trusted us." She searched his eyes, seeing the sincerity that had always been there, buried beneath walls he rarely let anyone see. "Alexander," she whispered, stepping closer. And then, without hesitation, he pulled her into a long, warm embrace. It wasn't just a hug, it was a promise, a bridge over the hurt and fear. Olivia rested her head against his chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart, and knew that forgiveness was mutual. They pulled back just enough to look at each other, and Alexander smiled, a smile unguarded, real, and brighter than it had ever been. "I don't want to waste another day apart," he said simply. Olivia laughed softly, relief and joy mingling in her chest. That evening, as they left the center together, hands intertwined, it was clear. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them side by side. The rift had been healed, replaced by a connection stronger than either had dared imagine. The weeks that followed were filled with quiet moments and shared laughter, a rhythm of life that neither Olivia nor Alexander had anticipated but both embraced wholeheartedly. Gone were the shadows of tension and mistrust. In their place grew a bond fortified by honesty, warmth, and the simple joy of being together. They discovered small rituals that made ordinary days extraordinary. Morning coffee shared on Alexander's balcony became sacred, a time for conversation and laughter before the demands of the day. Weekend walks through the park, hands intertwined, allowed them to escape the city's bustle and simply exist together. Every hug, brief or lingering, spoke volumes: comfort, reassurance, love. Alexander introduced Olivia to the quieter sides of his life. The family he rarely mentioned, the charitable projects close to his heart, and even his small circle of lifelong friends. Olivia, in turn, shared her world, her passions, and the dreams she had once thought impossible. With each interaction they built trust, mutual respect, and a vision for a shared life. It wasn't always easy. Alexander's business demands were relentless, and Olivia sometimes felt the strain of compromise, but the challenges only strengthened their connection. They learned to communicate, to listen without judgment, and to find joy in the small victories of everyday life. One evening, as they watched the city lights shimmer from Alexander's penthouse balcony, he pulled her close in a gentle hug. "I never imagined life could feel this complete," he murmured. Olivia rested her head on his shoulder, smiling. "We're building forever," she whispered. And in that quiet, golden moment, neither doubted it. Whatever the future held, they would face it together. Two hearts, intertwined, ready to embrace the life they had chosen and the love that had proven itself unbreakable. The city glittered beneath them like a sea of stars as Olivia and Alexander stood on the rooftop garden of his penthouse, the gentle night breeze carrying the faint scent of blooming jasmine. Tonight wasn't about business, galas, or past mistakes. It was about them and the life they had chosen to build together. Alexander took Olivia's hand, his grip firm but tender. "I've spent my life chasing success, accolades, and control," he said softly, "but none of it mattered until I found you. You've shown me what it means to truly trust, to truly love." Olivia's eyes shimmered with unshed tears. "And you've shown me that even someone who seems unbreakable can have a heart," she whispered, her voice steady despite the emotion swelling inside her. Then, with a quiet, deliberate gesture, Alexander presented her with a small, intricately wrapped box. Inside was a simple silver locket, engraved with their initials intertwined. "This isn't just jewelry," he said, lifting her hand gently to his lips. "It's a promise. A reminder that no matter where life takes us, we face it together." Olivia hugged him tightly, feeling the steady beat of his heart against her own. The locket pressed against her chest as if sealing the vow between them, a tangible symbol of their love, trust, and commitment. As they stood there, wrapped in each other's arms, the city lights twinkling around them, it was clear, this was more than romance. It was forever. And in that embrace, both knew that no challenge, no past mistake, could ever take away what they had found in each other. Their journey had begun at a spilled glass of wine.